Over the past couple months, we've done a lot of tier lists on this channel, and one that we keep getting requests for is tier listing compressors. So that's exactly what I'm going to do today. I'm going to rank 28 different compressors, hardware and software, and just kind of give you my experience with them, my thoughts on them. This is all completely subjective, so please don't take anything I say as gospel. This is just things that I like, how they fit my workflow and my sound. But if this video does anything, let it just kind of inspire you to try a bunch of new styles of compression, try a bunch of different compressors that you're not using already, because you might find some hidden gems. So we're going to jump in and check all of that out in 1 second, but before we do, I have a couple quick announcements. Number one, you're watching Make Pop Music. My name's Austin. We do these videos every single week, so if you like this, please make sure you like, comment, and subscribe so you can see our new videos every Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Also, check out our website, makepopmusic.com. If you want to win any of our sample packs, preset packs, or MIDI packs, all you have to do is leave a comment down below. Between now and the end of Monday, February 24th, I'll pick a winner on our Instagram, Make Pop Music. At random on Tuesday, you can pick any single item from our store, sample pack, preset pack, or MIDI pack. And the last little announcement that I have is that since I turned 30 this weekend, I turned 30 on February 23rd, I figured that I would do a little birthday blowout sale. So from now until the end of my birthday on February 23rd, you can save 30% on all sample packs, preset packs, and MIDI packs. And we're going to be running a special deal on our courses as well. And again, that's only going to last Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So the 21st, 22nd, and 23rd, at the end of the 23rd, everything goes back up to full price. I just figured I'm only turning 30 once, might as well do a fun little sale just for a couple days. So if you want to check any of that out, that's at makepopmusic.com. Again, 30% off until my birthday weekend is over. Other than that, let's dive in and let's look at this tier list. All right, here are the categories that we have. So we have my main squeeze. These are going to be things that I just couldn't live without. These are my go-tos in most circumstances. Then we have VC Slay, obviously a play on VCA. These are going to be basically like my high B, low A tier list. These are really, really great tools, things that I use all the time, but they're not like the top level. I'm trying to save this one for just a few today. And then we have Ratio K. These are, again, playing on ratio. These are just okay. These are things that I would do, and, C column, low B column, things that I like having, but not things that I reach for every mix. Then we have Very Meh, which is kind of whatever. Like, I don't know if I would necessarily always avoid them, but I'm never really grabbing them ever. This is kind of like my low C, D tier. And then we have Bypass. These are things that I think when I use them, they make my mix worse. I don't like them. I'm never, ever reaching for these. I'm not reaching for any clones of them. I'm not really interested in these at all. So if this is confusing to you, it's basically A, B, C, D, F, or, good to bad. Pretty self-explanatory. So we're starting with a classic. This is the 1176. This is the LN model, so basically the revision D. Most of the 1176 plugins that you have, or like the Blackface 1176s, are modeled after this one. This is just kind of like my go-to compressor for most things. Vocals, guitars, snares. It's pretty versatile. You have an attack and release that is fully, tweakable. Nothing's really fixed. It is a super, super fast compressor, so it is limited there. But to me, this is my main squeeze. I have a hardware version from AudioScape of this one. I love this one so much. If I could only use one compressor that was hardware, it would probably be this one, just because I know it so well and it does so much. Just to kind of tie that in, we have the basically Rev A, Rev B blue stripe version of the 1176. If you have any of the clones, the Waves, the Slate, the UAD, you're going to see blue stripe versions of this. I actually like this one a little bit less. A lot of people prefer it, but to me, I don't really like how it blooms the low mids and pushes the high mids forward quite as much. I think that the LN right here is just a little bit more transparent. I think that there's a little bit less noise that comes out of it, which is actually what LN stands for. And to me, if this is top tier, this is just one rank down. I would love to have a blue stripe in the studio, but it's not something that I would reach for every single mix like this LN. The next thing that we have is an 1178. I also have a hardware version of this in the studio made by Z&H Designs, and I really, really love this compressor. It's essentially two Silverface or Rev H 1176s put into one unit, and a lot of them that you can get will have things like mid-side options. They'll have independent left and right options. You can use them as dual mono. You can, mine has something like a parallel knob. So it really depends on which version of an 1178 you get, because a lot of the recreations will have different tools. I know the Z&H one is really, really great, and the AudioScape one is really, really great. And for this, I'm also putting this in VC Slay. I don't reach for it as much as I do with just like a typical 1176, but this thing is great, especially if you want that 1176 sound on something stereo like drum overheads, drum rooms, stereo mic'd acoustic guitar. This goes on basically all of my stereo acoustics. It is excellent. The next thing that we have is the DBX 160. To me, this is a classic VCA style compressor. It is amazing for drums. This is kind of the sound that you hear when you think of like snare drum compression. I think that this is one that a lot of, companies will try to replicate. The classic, I think, still goes for like $1,200. Do not confuse this with the new DBXs that have come out. I think they're calling them like the 160A. They don't really sound or feel anything like this. This unit to me is a classic. The new ones by DBX that are trying to, I think, capitalize on that same vibe, I don't love nearly as much. For me, I'm going to put this one in ratio K because I don't use it nearly as much as something like an FET 1176. But to me, if I want a little bit of compression on an acoustic guitar, or I have like a snare drum or a plucky synth, anything that I'm really trying to drive the transients, I think a DBX 160 is really, really, really great for that. The next thing that we have is a Distressor made by Empirical Labs. A lot of people really, really, really love a Distressor. To me, I don't use them as much as a lot of other people. I do like that they can impart a lot of saturation, especially as you drive them and if you hit the nuke ratio setting. I just think that I'm not mixing live drums enough to really get enough out of it, and I don't really like a Distressor on a lot of vocals personally. I know a lot of people love it for hip hop or for more aggressive rock. For pop, it has a little bit too much color in areas that I'm already getting color from things like a mic and a preamp. So to me, I'm putting this in ratio OK. I don't use it a ton. I know it's probably blasphemous. It's a lot of people's number one compressor. But for my sound and my taste, I rarely reach for the Distressor. It's not something that is making it in most mixes for me. The next thing that we have is an API 2500. This is a, really, really good version of a stereo kind of bus compressor. To me, the API 2500 does bus compression in a much more kind of modern way than something that we'll talk about later, like a G Bus or like a Vari Mu. To me, I'm using the 2500 much more on kind of instrument buses and less on a mix bus setting. You still could, but I love this on drums. I love this on acoustic guitar. It's basically a really nice, versatile VCA style bus compressor that can really grab transients. You can make it pretty fast. I love this on piano, actually. So for me, I'm putting this at the bottom of VC Slay. I use this quite a bit more than a Distressor and a 160. I believe there is a Waves version of this. There's a UAD version of this. I think that there might be another version that API is licensed, but I'm typically going for the UAD one, and it works out great. The next one is the Hazelrigg VNE. We've talked about this compressor on the channel a bunch. I've used the hardware. I'm hoping that there is a plugin coming soon, but this is different. This is a pulse width modulation compressor, so most of the others that we've talked about have been, FET, VCA. We're going to talk a little bit about Tube and Opto. The VNE, totally different. It compresses in a completely different way, and it has this amazing, super transparent sound that you can really squeeze. And for that, I'm putting it at the very, very top of VC Slay. Once I get another $5,000 in my pocket to just blow through, this will probably be one of the first things that I grab. I love this compressor so much because it can be so transparent and do such good compression. To me, it feels more like a, analog version of like a vocal rider, where it's really just grabbing things, but it's not coloring them too bad. It's not doing a lot of, mangling of the audio. The VNE is amazing. If you can check out any pulse width modulation compressors, try them out. They're kind of wild. The next one that we have is OTT. This is a Serum version, but I think it's just based off of like an Ableton preset. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to speak my truth. I don't really use OTT that much. And I find that a lot of the time, if you're not really careful, OTT can actually make a sound much worse than it needs to be. So you have to be really careful. If you're using OTT, I find that a lot of producers that lean on it, that's kind of their sound, is that super compressed, saturated, noisy sound. It's really, really great for electronic music. I'm putting this in very meh just because I think it's pretty overhyped. To me, OTT is more of a sound design tool rather than like a Band-Aid compressor like a lot of these. OTT can be really, really great if you're cooking that into the sound. It's not really something that I'm ever just grabbing to be like, oh, this needs a little something, let me put OTT on it. I think that it does a little bit too much under the hood, and I'm not really grabbing it often. The next thing that we have is Pro MB, so we're moving on to a multi-band compressor. I threw a couple in this list. We had some requests on them, and I just figured they're still compressors, gives me a chance to mention multi-band. This to me is a main squeeze. I use Pro MB so much. There's so many cool things that you can do to it. You can set your side chain parameters. You can, set your attack and your release. You can have the bands be as narrow or as wide as you need them to be. To me, Pro MB is basically a perfect, clean multi-band compressor. A lot of FabFilter stuff is pretty no frills, but if you need multi-band compression, if you're looking to really just clean up a sound, grab things that are a little annoying, a little resonant, Pro MB is my go-to. It is so good. The next one that we have is a little bit more obscure. It is the Focusrite RED3. If you have the Virtual Bus collection from Slate, this is the FG Red, I believe, is what this is based off of, or rather than what that plugin is based off of. I love the Red. It's one of my favorite bus compressors in the VB series. So I'm basing this purely off of that. I know a lot of people also use this for like spoken word dialogue. I know a lot of people use this for, maybe like a slight drum bus compression. I've used it for a drum bus as well, just to add a little bit of punch. To me, this is something that is a little bit slept on. It's a really nice version. I believe it is an Opto compressor. And so for that one, I'm going to put it at the, I'll put it at the very, very bottom of VC Slay. I really, really like a Focusrite RED3. They're a little hard to find, but they're great. The next one that we'll talk about is the Pawn Shop compressor. This is a plugin by Corniff Audio. If I'm looking to just absolutely smash a snare drum or a kick drum or a drum room sound, what a lot of people would use something like a Distressor for, I'm going for the Pawn Shop comp. I think that this thing is so good at just getting something to poke out and have transient and have attack. And it adds a little bit of, saturation. There's like nickel plates in there and iron plates in there. This to me is crazy. I'm actually putting this one towards the top of VC Slay. The next one that we have is the Fatso. This is also by Empirical Labs. This is a stereo unit that kind of relies more on being like a tape emulator version of a compressor. It's a bit warmer. It's a bit softer and rounder. To me, the Distressor kind of like pushes a sound forward where the Fatso kind of chills it out. I actually really like a Fatso very gently on something like an acoustic guitar, or very gently on like a drum overhead if I want kind of a fluffier drum sound. But I'm not using a Fatso a lot. There's not a lot of really good plug-in versions of it. And for that, I'm going to put it in ratio K, but I'm going to put it above the Distressor. Again, a lot of people are going to be pissed that the Distressor keeps falling. That's just where I'm putting it. The next thing that we'll talk about this one first. This is the Renaissance compressor, also called R-Comp from Waves. It's basically their version of just a digital compressor. You've got a threshold, you've got attack and release, and at the bottom you have the three buttons. You have the electro, you have I can't see them on my screen, but I believe it's electro, opto, and something else. This is a really, really great compressor if you just need to get compression. If you're not really looking for anything that's too tactile, too analog feeling, this is a really, really good compressor. It's not like a go-to for me, so I'm going to put it in ratio K. I think it's a good tool when I need it, but it's not like an instant that I grab. I will say this is going to sound crazy, but our Vox, it's basically a stripped back version with a fixed attack, a fixed release, a fixed threshold. I actually use our Vox a lot just as kind of a final, almost like a limiting compressor. So if I'm compressing a vocal on the way in, and then I'm hitting it again with something like a, Opto or a CO1B or a 1176 in the DAW, I might put R-Comp last and just get that last couple dB. And you're going to hate me for this, but I think it's really, really sick. I'm putting the RVox in VC Slay. To me, I don't really need to mess with a lot of the settings of something like R-Comp. I'm just popping on RVox just to give me a little bit of that sweet, tiny compression, maybe a couple dB here and there. I feel like it can really push a vocal forward. I kind of like how gritty it makes the high mids, but you do have to be careful because as you drive this, you do get quite a bit of like top end distortion. So just beware of that. The next thing that we're going to talk about is an LA2A. This is also known as an opto compressor from companies like AudioScape. Warm has one, Stam has one. Basically, any company that makes hardware will have a clone of an LA2A. This is like the optical compressor of optical compressors. It has a fixed attack, it has a fixed release, it has a fixed threshold. You can basically have it in compression mode or limiting mode. You can basically set the sidechain, so if you want to make sure that the compressor's not kicking on the low end too much, you can set that so it you know, kind of filters out rumble and then will only happen on actual peaks. And then you just have your peak reduction and you have your basically output trim. It's such a simple compressor that some of these I'm going to fault for not having enough knobs and enough control. This one is just kind of magic. I love an LA2A. I love it on vocals. I love it on bass. To me, it's a main squeeze. I have a hardware version from AudioScape. A 2A just kind of has a sound, right? You run things through it. It kind of blooms the lows, but in a really beautiful musical way. It's kind of grabbing everything, and it's slow, and it's gushy, and it's really kind of like the leveling compressor that a lot of people want, where I'm reaching for something like an 1176 or a 160 or, you know, a 2500 to really poke audio out and make it super aggressive and fun. I'm reaching for the 2A just to kind of sweeten it, really give me a few dB of gain reduction, and just add that classic 2A saturated sound. I'm using this almost more like a saturation unit than a compressor, but it's beautiful for that. The next one that we're going to talk about is All Comp. This is a plugin by Mixing Night Audio, which is Ken Lewis's company. It is a reskin of the plugin Lol Comp, which I've talked about on this channel before as well. This plugin is one of those really easy grab and go plugins where you can select, you know, vocals, drums, smash, and then it's basically just a one knob pass sat. Then you have some parameters at the bottom that you can kind of mess with. But to me, it is basically set on Ken Lewis's chains. So if you're looking for a plugin or a compressor that you can go in and get really nitty gritty with, this one is not that. But if you're looking for something to just throw on really quick, maybe early in the mix, maybe in a tracking session, I think that this is really, really, really good. I'm going to put it at the bottom of VC Slay. I'll put it one above Arvox. But again, sometimes I'm just looking for things like attack and release and ratio, and I like to kind of understand what's happening under the hood. So while this is an amazing sounding plugin, the fact that it's got a little bit of magic happening, sometimes that's not what I'm looking for when I have a compressor, so that does make it fall a few spots. The next one is the TDR Kotelnikov. This is a free plugin that automatically kind of boosts it a few levels. This is kind of the free compressor of free compressors. It sounds amazing, it looks ugly as sin, but if you're looking for a free compressor that you could use on everything from vocals to a bus, I think that this is a really good version. It can be really fast, it can be slower, it can be pretty transparent, you can push it kind of hard. To me, this is better than most DAW stock compressors, so if you are on a budget and you're looking to kind of upgrade from your Logic stock compressor or your Ableton stock compressor or even your Cubase stock compressor, I think that this is a solid upgrade, but the GUI, I don't really love working with. To me, I would say it's ratio okay, but since it's free, we're going to put it in VC Slay. If it wasn't free, even if it was $50, I'm dragging it down to okay. Since it's free, I feel like you have to put it there. The next one that we have is a TubeTech CL1B. This is part of the iconic chain of like a mic into a 1073 into a CL1B. This is known for being an optical compressor like the LA2A, but different in almost every way. There is variable attack and release. There is an automatic attack and release. There is, you can set your threshold. I find that the CL1B is much, much, much cleaner. So if you like that slower, gushier compression of kind of an optical compressor, but you're not looking for all of that low mid bloom, you want to be able to control things like attack and release and threshold, this is a good option. To me, I kind of get lost in the weeds sometimes when I'm working with this. I'm actually going to throw this in the middle of VC Slay because if I'm looking for a cleaner compressor, I'm probably going to go for a VNE. And if I'm looking for an optical compressor, I'm probably going for the character in an LA2A. Sometimes I don't like when a compressor is too clean, but if I'm looking for the clean version, I think the VNE does it better. It's hard to decide for me. This kind of like, you have super vibey, super clean, kind of falls in the middle, but since that is the case, I find myself reaching for it less. And since there's so many knobs and you have to worry about manual versus fixed ratio, there's just things that if you're not paying attention, you can spend 20 minutes fucking with this compressor and then coming out and it sounds worse than it sounded before you were even dealing with it. So be really careful if you're using the TubeTech CL1B. I think it is a great compressor, but I also think that you can get lost on it pretty easily. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the Elysia. I never know how to pronounce the brand, but it is the Alpha compressor, basically a mastering compressor. I use the one that is in the Plugin Alliance bundle all the time. I've never used the hardware, admittedly, but I'm just going to go ahead and give you a spoiler alert for bus compression or master bus compression specifically. This is kind of my favorite version of that. You're going to see some low ranks down here when we get to some classic master bus compressors that are going to piss y'all off. If I'm looking for a little bit of compression on my master bus, this is doing it. I'm actually putting this at the very top. Actually, maybe I'll put it here because for the style of compressor, it is the main one that I go for. I think that it pushes sound forward really, really well. You have a lot of different parameters in this that you don't get in other, classic mastering compressors. You can do forward feed or backwards feed. You can do parallel compression in this kind of built in. You can do mid-side. I think that it is just so flexible and it can sound so open and so punchy. A lot of mastering compressors are really known for being warm and gluey, and that's great, but sometimes that can make something feel a little bit soft, especially if you're working with modern pop. It can make things just feel a little bit subdued, where this Alpha compressor just really makes things smack. I love this on a mixed bus. I think it is so overlooked and underrated. Try the Alpha compressor. If there's not another one that you try on this list, if you have that Plugin Alliance bundle or you can find it on sale, try this plugin. It is so good. The next one that we're going to talk about is FabFilter Pro C. This is gonna ruffle feathers because I love FabFilter. I love Pro Q. Pro and B made it to the top. Pro C to me is at the bottom of Ratio K. I don't use this a ton. If I'm looking for a cleaner compressor, I will go for something like just a stock compressor, or I'll just go for something like the Renaissance compressor. I don't reach for Pro C a lot. I know that there's all of the different saturation modes and character modes, and I know you can do a lot of side chaining with the built-in EQ. I just don't care. Like, it's too much shit happening in one plugin for me to care about. I don't think that the characteristic sounds that it imparts are that special, and I don't think that the clean sound is that special. So to me, it's one of the FabFilter plugins that I care the least about in my entire bundle, because there's just so many other versions of a plugin that can kind of do the same things that I'm using this plugin for without having all of these knobs to kind of get lost in the weeds with or obsess over. Again, I love FabFilter, one of my favorite plugin companies. A lot of people love Pro C. This is a lot of people's number one desert island compressor. I don't care for it. It's fine. The next thing that we're going to talk about is the STA Level. There is a new plugin version of this by Mixwave that is so good. I've been using it basically on every bass and every drum parallel bus, and this thing rips. I'm putting this probably right here. I'm putting this right in the middle of VC Slay. It definitely has a sound. It definitely has a character to it, but since it is a tube compressor, I think that the way that it works with lows and low mids is gorgeous. I wouldn't use it on something like my vocal, but if you're doing like a big soul vocal or a pop standards vocal, or you're using something like an upright bass, you're using something that you want that kind of big bravado low end, low mid, this is crazy for that. It is so good. If you're looking for something to just kind of really be the vibey retro, almost like gives me like a Frank Sinatra style, vocal timbre, the STA Level is crazy. I love it on bass. I've been using it all the time. The saturation that it has, I believe it's doing even order harmonics, so the saturation on lows and low mids really can fill out a spectrum without making things muddy or resonant. The STA Level is crazy, and specifically the Mixwave one, very good. The next one that we have is the HMD Rosetta compressor. This is from friends of the channel, Help Me Devon. I think that the Rosetta compressor is a great tool for people who like to visually see what's happening. I think that that's one of the coolest parts about this, is the fact that you can kind of see in real time what is happening with the audio when you change things like your attack, your release, your threshold. You can change your knee. I don't reach for it that much because I don't care as much about the visual look of things. This to me is kind of doing something similar that like Renaissance Comp is, but you can see the waveforms happening. So for that, I think they did a good job with the plugin, but since it's not something that I reach for very often, I am going to put it at the top of Ratio K. If you're getting into audio and you're looking for a compressor to really understand what's happening, I think that the Rosetta Comp may be the best on the list. If you're just looking for something that you can just tweak knobs, not overanalyze the visual aspect of it, and kind of use your ears, I think that this can be a little bit of a detriment. So with that said, I love the Help Me Devon crew. I love this plugin. I just don't reach for it that much because to me, the visual aspect is not that important, and there's just a bunch of other plugins that have character that I'm leaning for a little bit more. The next one that we're going to talk about is the LA3A. This is kind of a follow-up to the LA2A. I find that the LA3A, it is still fixed attack, fixed release, fixed ratio, but to me, it's a little bit faster, it's a little bit grabbier. It's definitely not nearly as fast as like an 1176 or a Distressor or something like that, but I think that this is beautiful on like acoustic guitars, pianos, things that have a little bit of transient, but you're not trying to necessarily over-accentuate the transient, where, you know, if you're not careful, an acoustic guitar or a piano through an LA2A could get really gushy. They could get a little bit too soft. I think that the 3A still lets that transient peak through. So if I want that kind of beautiful round opto compression and I'm looking for it to be a little bit more responsive to transients, I'm actually reaching for this. I'm going to reorganize this a little bit. I love Pawn Comp, but since it's so specialized, I'm moving it down here a little bit. Okay, this is looking better. The next one that we are going to talk about is the Fairchild 670 or 660, whichever one that you're using, if you're using any kind of plugins. To me, I'm going to catch a lot for this. I don't love a Fairchild. I don't love the style of compression. I don't love what it does to my mix bus. To me, it gets a little bit soft. It's a little bit too gluey and warm. I think that if you're working with things like jazz or soul or folk singer-songwriter, this can kind of bloom things to give you that really three-dimensional, warm but glued together sound. When I pop this on a pop mix or a hip-hop mix or an electronic mix, I don't really like what it does to the low end at all. I really don't like what it does to the low mids. I feel like my transients start disappearing a little bit. It kind of does the opposite of what I'm wanting to happen on a mix bus. I don't necessarily want to have no glue on my mix bus, but this, I feel like, is just rounding it out. I like mixes that are sharp, they're punchy, you can hear every individual element. This, to me, does the opposite of that. So, I'm sorry, I'm putting it in bypass. It feels wild to put an $11,000 compressor in bypass, but for me, and for my needs, and for what I use compression for, not there for me. The next one that we're going to talk about is Lin MB. This is by Waves. This is a multi-band compressor as well, but it is linear phase. I use it all the time on my master bus just as kind of a sweetener, just to do tiny, tiny, tiny bits, maybe half a dB to 1 dB of compression on moments that might need it. A lot of people mix through a multi-band compressor and it can kind of be a band-aid. I'm more so just using it to kind of give me that last little bit of edge, and for that, I'm putting it in the bottom of VC Slay. I don't think that it's absolutely necessary to my workflow, but I do love the preset that I have in there. It has become a staple for me, but I could probably do that in Pro MB, and then I could use Pro MB for a lot more other stuff as well. The next one that we're going to talk about is the Shadow Hills mastering compressor. This, again, is kind of where I said that people are going to start getting really pissed off. I don't love this one either. Maybe I'm using mastering compressors wrong. Maybe I mix in a way that just classic mastering compressors don't agree with. But again, this one feels like it can get a little bit like boomy and woofy for me. I think that it's also doing some harmonic stuff with even order harmonics, but unlike the STA level that I'm using on an individual, section like a bass or a kick drum, I'm not really looking for that on my whole total mix. So to me, this is going in very meh. They're super expensive units. I would never own the hardware. I just don't like the way that my mixes sound going through them 99% of the time. Again, maybe I'm using it wrong. I will say what's cool about this, and the reason that I rank this actually substantially higher than something like a Fairchild, is this actually has VCA circuits and Opto circuits, so you can swap it to VCA and it's a little bit faster. It's a little bit less gushy, but I don't know, something about it to me. Again, try a Shadow Hills yourself. It's a lot of mastering house's #1 compressor. For me, I just don't love it. The next one that we're going to talk about is the SSL G Comp. This is a bus compressor. A lot of people will have like the AudioScape version or the Stam audio version or the 500 series SSL version. It's a good bus compressor. It's not one that I'm reaching for. It's great if you just kind of get 1 or 2 dB of bus compression and you're not really looking for an insane amount of character or sound or, saturation or glue. To me, it's fine. Like, I could use it pretty easily, but I could also live without it. I'm going to pop it probably right here, dead in the middle of ratio K. I think that it's a good bus compressor, but it's not anything special to me. And then the last one that we're going to talk about is the Manley Vari Mu. So this is actually where it kind of differs, because the, Fairchild is also a variable compressor. However, I think that the Manley Vari Mu is quite a bit better. If I'm looking to kind of get the classic Shadow Hills, Fairchild, warm, gushy analog sound, I think that the Vari Mu by Manley is a bit more updated. I think that it was probably made more with a modern producer in mind, because I think this was made years and years and years after these. I like this a lot better. I'm popping this in the bottom of VC Slay because, to me, if I want a mix bus or a master compressor that's really pushing things forward, I'm going for the Alpha Master. If I'm looking for one that's going to do kind of the glue thing, I'm probably going for this. I'm probably going for the Manley Vari Mu. There is a plugin. I can't remember who makes the plugin. It might also be, I think it's Universal Audio that makes that one. But it is gluey. It is a little bit vibey. But to me, it's not absolutely ruining my low end and my low mids like a Shadow Hills or a Fairchild. So now that I've done that, let's go through, because I feel like VC Slay has a lot. I'm going to kind of rearrange this very, very, very quickly. I think that I don't know what to do. Like, I feel like okay is kind of harsh for a lot of things. Like, I feel like it should be like amazing, great, good, whatever, and bad. I don't know. It feels like there's a lot in here, but I think that there's a lot of really, really good compressors. If I had to get really, really harsh, I'd probably say that like RVox could come down here. If I had to get really harsh, I would feel like maybe the Kotelnikov could come down here, because to me, it's nothing special. These all do something very specific. And when I'm looking for a compressor, a lot of the time I'm looking for something specific, whether it's character or it is specifically how the attack and the release work or the specific ratios that are in it. Special features like, for instance, the all buttons in version on an 1176. I'm looking for things that really put that above just using something like a stock compressor. And this is probably where I would have my list. I think that this is pretty indicative of how I feel about compression. Most are good. A couple are amazing, and only a few I'm just kind of steering clear of. So with that said, let me know which one that you disagree with the most. Let me know what you think I was the most out of pocket with in this video, and what your number one or top 3 compressors are. But that's going to do it for this video. Again, I just wanted to remind you that since my birthday is this weekend, go shop my birthday sale on makepopmusic.com, 30% off of sample packs, preset packs, and MIDI packs. There's also going to be a special deal on courses over there as well. That ends at the end of February 23rd. Also, leave a comment down below before the end of February 24th. We'll be picking a winner next Tuesday on our Instagram, Make Pop Music. You can pick any of those items if you don't cop them for my birthday special. But that's going to do it for this video. We'll be back next week with even more content. I'll see you guys soon. Much love. Peace.